The South China Sea, one of the most contested waters on the planet. American warships patrol here regularly. Freedom of navigation, they call it. But China calls it something else: provocation. And on this particular day, they decided to send a message, a dangerous one. A Chinese J-11 fighter jet scrambled from a coastal airbase. Its mission was clear: intercept the American destroyer, let them know they weren't welcome. But what happened next wasn't just an intercept, it was a confrontation that could have sparked an international incident, or worse. This is the story of what happens when military posturing goes too far, when a pilot flies too close, when split-second decisions could mean the difference between diplomacy and disaster, and why messing with a U.S. Navy destroyer is never a good idea. The USS Decatur, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, one of the most advanced warships ever built, equipped with Aegis radar systems, Tomahawk missiles, and enough defensive capabilities to handle almost any threat. On this morning, it was conducting a routine patrol near the Spratly Islands. The Spratly Islands, a chain of reefs and small islands claimed by multiple countries: China, Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia. But China has been the most aggressive, building artificial islands, installing military bases, and declaring the entire region as their territory. America disagrees. The U.S. Navy regularly conducts freedom of navigation operations here, sailing through waters that China claims as their own, sending a message that international waters belong to everyone. China hates it. Every single time an American ship passes through, they respond, sometimes with words, sometimes with action. That morning on the Decatur, everything seemed routine. The captain had briefed the crew. They knew Chinese response was likely. It always was. Radar operators watched their screens. Communications officers monitored frequencies. Everyone was alert, but no one expected what was about to happen. At 0730 hours, radar picked up the contact, fast-moving, low altitude, coming directly toward them. The operator called it out immediately. Aircraft inbound, bearing 180, approaching at high speed. The bridge went silent. All eyes turned to the horizon. The Chinese jet appeared as a speck at first, then it grew larger and larger. Most intercepts happen at a safe distance, a few thousand feet, maybe a flyby at a quarter mile, standard stuff. But this pilot had different plans. He was coming in close, very close. Sailors on deck stopped what they were doing. They could hear it now, the roar of jet engines getting louder. Someone pointed, there, coming right at them. The jet dropped lower, lower than anyone had seen before. This wasn't a normal intercept. This was aggressive. The J-11 screamed over the water at nearly 400 miles per hour. It passed the destroyer at an altitude of just 300 feet and a lateral distance that made experienced sailors gasp. 45 yards. That's less than half a football field. Dangerously close. On the bridge, Captain Anderson kept his composure, but inside, his mind was racing. At that speed and distance, one wrong move by either side could be catastrophic. A slight miscalculation, a gust of wind, anything could turn this into a collision, an international incident. But the Chinese pilot wasn't done. He banked hard left, circled around, and lined up for another pass. The crew watched in disbelief. Once could be a message. Twice? That was intimidation, the kind that could easily go wrong, the kind that tests everyone's nerves. Captain Anderson grabbed the radio. He ordered his communications officer to broadcast on international frequencies, warning the Chinese aircraft, advising them to maintain safe distance. The response? Static. Then a burst of Mandarin, then nothing. The pilot either wasn't listening or didn't care. The second pass was even closer, 30 yards this time, close enough to see the pilot's helmet, close enough to read the aircraft numbers. The jet's wake actually rocked the destroyer slightly. Sailors grabbed railings. This was no longer posturing. This was reckless, dangerously reckless. Now here's where things get interesting. The USS Decatur is not a defenseless cargo ship. It carries serious defensive weaponry. Phalanx close-in weapon systems, rolling airframe missiles, SM-2 surface-to-air missiles. If that pilot had been classified as a threat, things could have ended very differently. The Phalanx system alone can track and destroy incoming threats in seconds. It fires 4,500 rounds per minute, radar-guided, fully automated. If it had been activated, that Chinese jet would have had maybe 3 seconds before becoming confetti. But the captain holed fire. Why? Because this wasn't combat, it was a game of chicken, and the US Navy doesn't escalate unless absolutely necessary. Captain Anderson kept his crew calm, documented everything, and let the pilot make his mistakes. After 3 close passes, the Chinese jet finally broke off. It climbed to altitude and headed back toward the mainland. The encounter had lasted less than 15 minutes, but it had raised pulses across the entire Pacific Fleet and triggered a response that China wasn't expecting.
See, the US Navy documents everything. Every intercept, every close call, every aggressive maneuver. Cameras on the ship had captured the entire encounter, multiple angles, clear footage, timestamps, everything needed to prove exactly what happened. And that footage was about to make international headlines. Within hours, the incident was briefed to Pacific Command, then to the Pentagon, then to the White House. The footage was reviewed by military analysts. The conclusion was unanimous. This wasn't a routine intercept. This was an unsafe and unprofessional maneuver that violated international norms. The US Navy released a formal statement. They called the intercept unsafe and unprofessional. They released portions of the footage to media. The world got to see just how close that jet had come, and the backlash was immediate. Diplomatic channels lit up. China's response, predictable. They blamed the US, said American ships shouldn't be in Chinese waters, called it a provocation, the standard playbook. But the footage told a different story, and this time the world was watching. Even China's usual allies were quiet. The pilot had gone too far. Now, before we continue, let's understand why this matters. The South China Sea isn't just about pride, it's about power. Over $3 trillion in trade passes through these waters every year. Control this region and you control global commerce. That's why everyone cares. That's why China builds artificial islands. That's why they claim territorial waters. That's why they intercept foreign ships. They want to control the most important shipping lane on Earth, and the US Navy stands in their way. These encounters aren't accidents. They're part of a larger struggle. But here's what China often forgets. The US Navy has been operating in these waters for decades. American sailors train for exactly these scenarios. They don't panic, they don't overreact, and they certainly don't back down. That's what makes these confrontations so dangerous. Neither side blinks. Let me explain what the Decatur's crew was actually prepared for. The moment that jet was detected, the ship went to a heightened readiness state. Defensive systems were activated but not engaged. Weapons were ready but not aimed. A careful balance between caution and capability. In the Combat Information Center, every system was tracking that jet, its speed, its altitude, its heading. If it had shown any sign of weapons deployment, the response would have been instant, but it didn't. It was aggressive posturing, not an attack, so the crew watched and waited. The Decatur carries over 90 vertical launch cells. Each one can hold a missile capable of destroying aircraft, ships, or land targets. That's 90 chances to ruin someone's day. The Chinese pilot was flying circles around a ship that could have erased him from the sky instantly. Now, let's be fair. Military intercepts happen all the time. Russian jets buzz American planes, American jets intercept Russian bombers. It's part of the game. But there are rules, unwritten codes of conduct, safe distances, professional behavior. This Chinese pilot broke all of them. Experienced pilots know the limits. They know how close is too close. They understand that one mistake at those speeds means death. This wasn't a rookie error. This was deliberate, a calculated risk to send a message. But the message backfired badly. Because within days of the incident, the U.S. responded, not with words this time, with ships. More destroyers were deployed to the region. A carrier strike group adjusted its patrol routes. The message was clear. You want to play games? Fine, we'll bring more players. An American carrier strike group is not something you want heading your direction. One carrier, multiple destroyers and cruisers, attack submarines, roughly 75 aircraft, the combined firepower of some countries' entire military. China had poked the bear. The bear was now paying attention. Over the next few weeks, American aircraft increased their patrols. More jets in the sky, more ships on the water. Every Chinese intercept was met with calm professionalism and overwhelming presence. The U.S. wasn't escalating, they were demonstrating. There's a difference, and China noticed. Behind closed doors, diplomatic pressure mounted. The footage had been embarrassing. International observers criticized China's behavior. Even countries that usually stayed neutral expressed concern. The pilot who flew that mission? Let's just say his career trajectory probably changed. His commanders weren't happy. Because here's the thing about aggressive intercepts. When they work, they create fear. When they fail, they create unity. This one failed spectacularly. U.S. allies in the region strengthened their positions. Japan increased naval cooperation. Australia announced new partnerships. The Philippines renewed military agreements. Instead of scaring America away, China had pushed them closer to their allies. Instead of demonstrating strength, they demonstrated recklessness. The pilot flew a perfect intercept from a technical standpoint, but from a strategic standpoint, it was a disaster. Sometimes the best flying makes the worst decisions. Meanwhile, the USS Decatur continued its patrol, unshaken, undeterred. The crew had handled the situation exactly as trained. No panic, no escalation, just professional response to unprofessional behavior. They'd sail through these waters again and again, because that's what freedom of navigation means. But make no mistake, these encounters will continue. China isn't backing down from their territorial claims, and America isn't stopping their patrols. The South China Sea remains a flashpoint, a place where military forces from rival powers operate in close proximity every day. The difference is technology. American ships have systems that track everything, every aircraft, every ship, every radar signal within hundreds of miles. They see threats coming long before they arrive. That Chinese pilot thought he was surprising them. He wasn't. They watched him the entire way. After the encounter, the Navy conducted a thorough review. What worked? What could be improved, how to handle similar situations in the future. Every incident becomes a learning opportunity. Every close call makes them better prepared. That's why the U.S. Navy maintains its edge. They train constantly, simulating exactly these scenarios. What if a jet comes too close? What if communications fail? What if someone actually fires? Every possibility is rehearsed until the response becomes automatic. That's why the Decatur's crew handled it so well. They'd done it before, in training. The sailors on that ship represented something bigger, a tradition of professionalism stretching back generations. Young men and women far from home, holding the line in contested waters. They didn't choose the confrontation, but they handled it with composure that made their country proud. That flag on the stern means something. It means that ship can sail wherever international law allows. It means no nation can bully it out of international waters. It means that despite the risks, American sailors will keep showing up every day. That's the commitment. And here's what really matters. For all China's aggressive posturing, nothing changed that day. The Decatur completed its patrol. It sailed exactly where it intended to sail. No deviation, no retreat. The intercept was dramatic, but ultimately meaningless. The mission continued. The message was sent. When the Decatur eventually returned to port, the crew was debriefed extensively. Their actions were praised. The captain's restraint was noted. In a situation that could have escalated dramatically, they'd maintained control. That's not weakness, that's strength. The strength to have power and choose not to use it. The U.S. 7th Fleet continues to operate in the Western Pacific. Dozens of ships, hundreds of aircraft, thousands of sailors. They're not going anywhere. And every time China tries to push them out, they push back, quietly, professionally, but firmly. That's how great power competition works. Military strategists on both sides know the risks. One accident could escalate into something neither side wants. That's why rules of engagement exist. That's why communication channels stay open. Even rivals need to talk, because the alternative is too dangerous to consider. The Pacific is big enough for everyone. International waters belong to no single nation. That's been the rule for centuries. China is trying to rewrite those rules. The US and its allies say no. That fundamental disagreement drives every patrol, every intercept, every close call. So what's the lesson here? Maybe it's about restraint, having overwhelming force but choosing not to use it. Maybe it's about professionalism, doing your job even when someone is trying to provoke you. Or maybe it's simpler. Some ships you just don't fly too close to. Because that pilot learned something that day. You can fly as close as you want. You can make all the aggressive maneuvers you want. But at the end of the day, that American ship will still be there, still patrolling, still unafraid, and you will have accomplished nothing. The crew of the Decatur moved on. Another patrol, another day. They'd faced down an aggressive intercept and handled it perfectly. No medals for that, no headlines for them personally, just the quiet satisfaction of doing the job right. That's what professionals do. And tomorrow, another ship will sail through those same waters. Another crew will face the same challenges.
Maybe another jet will fly too close, and they'll handle it the same way. Because that's the job, that's the mission, that's what it means to serve. Captain Anderson later reflected on that day. He said the hardest part wasn't the intercept itself, it was knowing that one wrong decision could have changed everything, the weight of that responsibility. Knowing that restraint was the right call, even when every instinct said otherwise. That's leadership. Not the glory of combat, but the wisdom to avoid it when possible. To stand firm without escalating. To send a message through presence, not aggression. The Chinese pilot chose aggression. The American captain chose restraint. History will judge which approach was wiser. The South China Sea remains contested. These encounters will continue. Both sides know it. But as long as American sailors maintain their professionalism, as long as they respond to provocation with calm capability, the situation remains manageable. That's the balance. That's the challenge every single day. If this story showed you something new about what happens in contested waters around the world, hit that like button. Subscribe for more real military encounters that show what our sailors and soldiers face every day. The stuff that rarely makes headlines, but always matters. Drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were Captain Anderson? Engage the defensive systems as a warning, or maintain restraint like he did? There's no perfect answer. That's what makes these situations so intense. I want to hear your tactical take. These waters may look peaceful from above, but beneath the surface, a constant strategic competition plays out. Ships and submarines, aircraft and satellites. Every day forces maneuver. Every day professionals do their jobs. And every day the peace holds, because good people make hard choices. Until next time, stay informed, stay curious, and remember, somewhere right now, An American ship is on patrol, watching, waiting, ready. Flying too close to them isn't brave, it's not strategic, it's just a mistake, a big one. Some ships you simply don't mess with.